We are live inside the EP Official Election Center, and it's finally here, Election Night 2028. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard is looking to extend the Trump era into a third straight Republican term. Standing in her way, former Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, who's hoping to steer the country in a new direction. It's one of the tightest races in modern history. Just take a look at the final polling averages heading into tonight. Buttigieg holds a narrow edge nationwide, roughly 1 point, but as always, the national vote is only part of the story. The real battle will be won or lost in the battlegrounds, where both candidates have poured nearly all their time and resources, and it's deadlocked. Heading into tonight, Gabbard leads in 3 of the 6 core swing states, Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia, with her slimmest edge in Georgia, where she's up by just half a point, well within the margin of error. Buttigieg, born in Indiana and raised in Michigan, holds razor-thin leads in the 3 pivotal Rust Belt states, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, the same trio that decided the last 3 presidential elections. Flip just those 3 in any of the past cycles, and you change the outcome. Once again, they could decide it all. From coast to coast, this is the moment. Welcome to Election Night 2028. The race for 270 starts right now. We've reached our first major poll closing of the night. The clock is just a few moments from striking 7 p.m. here on the East Coast, where we will receive the first results of the 2028 presidential race from 6 states totaling 60 electoral votes. We're anxiously awaiting the first returns from the battleground state of Georgia, where early results could provide us with our first hint as to where the election is headed tonight. All right, we have our first projections of the night. EP Official now projects that Republican nominee Tulsi Gabbard will carry the state of Indiana. Gabbard wins the Hoosier state and its 11 electoral votes, defeating Democrat Pete Buttigieg in his home state. In South Carolina, Gabbard racks up another early win, securing 9 more electoral votes from the Palmetto state. And in Kentucky, no surprise here, Gabbard also takes the reliably red bluegrass state and its 8 electoral votes. On the Democratic side, we have our first projection as well. Pete Buttigieg has carried the state of Vermont. That's 3 electoral votes going to the former Transportation Secretary. Now, a couple key battlegrounds still too early to call. Georgia, 16 electoral votes up for grabs in one of the most fiercely contested states of the last decade. It returned to the Republican column for Trump in 2024 and is likely a must-win for the Gabbard campaign tonight. Results are expected to come in quickly, offering an early indication of how the evening might unfold. A loss here for Gabbard would likely signal a strong night for Democrats elsewhere. As for the Commonwealth of Virginia, 13 electoral votes. It's consistently leaned blue in recent years, but it's close enough tonight that we can't call it just yet. So here's where things stand in the Electoral College. Tulsi Gabbard has 28 electoral votes, Pete Buttigieg with 3. 270, of course, is the number to win, and most of the map is still wide open. Most polling stations are still open across the country, with voters casting ballots coast to coast. We'll have more results and projections coming up right after this break. We're approaching another critical round of poll closings in the Gabbard versus Buttigieg presidential race, just moments away now here at 7:30 p.m. on the East Coast. That's when polls will close in the battlegrounds of North Carolina and Ohio, as well as the state of West Virginia. Together, these 3 states account for 38 of the 270 electoral votes needed to win the White House. We have an EP official projection in West Virginia. National Intelligence Director Tulsi Gabbard will carry the state and its 4 electoral votes. Meanwhile, it's too early to call in North Carolina, a critical 16 electoral votes up for grabs. The Tar Heel state remains one of the most tightly contested battlegrounds in the country. Democrats have been increasingly bullish on their chances here this cycle, pointing to demographic shifts and steady gains in urban and suburban areas. It's also a key test for Pete Buttigieg's appeal, especially among college-educated suburban voters, and whether that can offset lingering vulnerabilities with Black and Hispanic turnout. Over in Ohio, 17 electoral votes at stake, it's also too early to call. Once a bellwether, Ohio has shifted decisively to the right over the last decade, but Democrats remain hopeful that 2026 headwinds and a changing electorate could bring it back into play. No Republican has ever won the presidency without carrying Ohio. Let's pull up the Electoral College map as it stands. The 5 electoral votes from West Virginia bring Tulsi Gabbard to 33, while Pete Buttigieg holds at 3. Georgia and Virginia are still too close to call, and now they're joined by Ohio and North Carolina. Let's get a key race alert out on all 4 right now. Precincts are about to close in 16 states and the District of Columbia. This is the biggest round of poll closings tonight, with a whopping 172 electoral votes at stake, almost a third of the total up for grabs in the next hour, including the absolutely pivotal battleground of Pennsylvania. We've got a whole lot of projections to make right now. Let's bring you some new projections at the top of the hour, starting in Massachusetts, where EP official can project that Pete Buttigieg will carry the deep blue Bay State. He secures all 11 of its electoral votes. Buttigieg also wins in Maryland. Another 10 electoral votes go into the Democratic column from this longtime stronghold. In Connecticut, EP can project a win for Buttigieg as well, 7 electoral votes added to his total. And in Rhode Island, 4 more electoral votes go to the former transportation secretary. Buttigieg also carries Delaware, 3 electoral votes there, and as expected, the District of Columbia, where all 3 of its votes are projected to go blue. We can also project that Buttigieg will win Maine's 1st congressional district, traditionally the more Democratic half of the state. However, Maine's other 3 electoral votes, 2 from the statewide total and 1 from the more conservative 2nd district, remain too early to call. Now on the Republican side, EP official can project that Tulsi Gabbard will win the state of Florida, securing all 30 of its electoral votes. We've been tracking results from across the state for the past hour, and with polls now closed in the Panhandle, we can make this call as expected. Florida has seen one of the sharpest rightward shifts in the nation since 2016, and tonight marks a 2nd consecutive double-digit GOP win here. Gabbard is also projected to win in Tennessee, 11 more electoral votes from the volunteer state. In Missouri, she adds another 10 electoral votes to her tally. And in Alabama, EP can project that Gabbard will win the state and its 9 electoral votes. She also carries Oklahoma, adding 7 electoral votes as the state extends its Republican streak to 15 consecutive presidential elections, tying an all-time record. And finally, in Mississippi, 6 more electoral votes for Tulsi Gabbard as she wins decisively in the deep red South. Turning now to the races that are still too early to call, Pennsylvania, 19 electoral votes, remains one of the most fiercely contested states in the country, and once again, it may prove decisive in the race for the White House. No surprise that it's too early to call at this hour. Illinois, also with 19 electoral votes, is too early to call as well. While long considered safely Democratic, its margin has narrowed significantly in recent years. Kamala Harris won the state by just 11 points in 2024, the narrowest Democratic victory there in 2 decades. New Jersey is also too early to call. Once a Democratic bedrock, the Garden State shifted sharply right in 2024, surprising many political observers. The question tonight, can Gabbard build on that momentum, or will Buttigieg start to turn the tide back? In New Hampshire, for electoral votes, we're still waiting on final tallies, though a good portion of the vote is already in. It remains too early to call. Sticking in New England, the statewide race in Maine is also too early to call. Again, Buttigieg has been projected to win the 1st congressional district, but the statewide result and the more rural 2nd district are both still outstanding. And remember, if no candidate secures an outright majority in the statewide votes, Maine's ranked choice voting process could come into play. Out west, Nebraska's 2nd congressional district, centered around Omaha, is too close to call. This urban battleground has leaned blue in recent cycles, going for Biden in 2020 and Harris in 2024, but remains tightly contested tonight. So let's take a step back and assess where things stand in the race to 270 electoral votes. Tulsi Gabbard currently leads with 105 electoral votes, while Pete Buttigieg has secured 42. At this hour, 9 states remain too close to call, shaded in white on your screen, and many of the biggest prizes still lie ahead in states where polls have not yet closed, shown here in gray. Among them, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Arizona, all scheduled to close at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll break down the latest vote totals and margins from the states where ballots are already being counted, right after this. EP can also now project a win for Pete Buttigieg in Illinois. As expected, the former transportation secretary holds the state for the Democrats, securing its 19 electoral votes. Buttigieg manages to slightly rebuild the Democratic margin here, winning Illinois by roughly 12 points, 54.9% to Gabbard's 42.7%, temporarily halting the state's recent rightward trend. Let's take a look at the updated electoral map. With those 19 votes added from Illinois, Buttigieg's total rises to 61 as he continues to trail Tulsi Gabbard in the early stages of the night. That said, the current lead for Gabbard is far from decisive. In fact, these early numbers are exactly what you'd expect given the state's reporting so far. We're hearing from sources close to the Buttigieg campaign that there's quiet optimism behind the scenes, with early vote totals hitting internal benchmarks in key battlegrounds. It's shaping up to be one of the closest contests in modern history. It's 8:30 p.m. on the East Coast, and polls have just closed in the state of Arkansas, and we've got an EP official projection coming in right now. And And we have a projection here as Tulsi Gabbard will carry the state of Arkansas, securing the state's 6 electoral votes. Arkansas has consistently backed Republican presidential candidates since 1996, and tonight continues that trend. With those 6 votes added, Gabbard's electoral total now climbs to 111, while Pete Buttigieg remains at 61. We've got a key race alert coming your way right now. Alright, we've got a pair of key projections to bring you right now. Election Pulse can now project that Pete Buttigieg will win the Commonwealth of Virginia. With 13 electoral votes, this state has been a bedrock of Democratic presidential coalitions for over a decade, and tonight it stays blue. Buttigieg takes Virginia with 53.1% of the vote to Tulsi Gabbard's 44.6%, a margin of about 8.5 points. That's a 3-point improvement over Kamala Harris's performance here 4 years ago, an early positive sign for Democrats in a state that's often been a bellwether for suburban sentiment. We also have a projection in the Buckeye State. Tulsi Gabbard will carry Ohio, securing 17 more electoral votes. This marks the 4th consecutive Republican win in Ohio, but Gabbard's margin is worth noting, 53.7% to 44%, or a 9.7-point victory. That's actually narrower than Trump's 11-point win here in 2024, making it another subtle but encouraging signal for Democrats, particularly if margins tighten across the Rust Belt. So with those calls, the updated Electoral College count stands at 74 for Buttigieg and 128 for Gabbard. Still ahead, some of the biggest prizes on the map remain too close to call, including Georgia, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania. These are the races that will define the night and likely determine the next president of the United States. Stay with us, we're just getting started. Voting is coming to a close in 14 states as we approach the second biggest wave of results here at 9 o'clock Eastern Time. A massive 156 electoral votes are up for grabs, with several key battleground states in focus, ranging from Arizona in the Southwest to Michigan and Wisconsin in the Midwest. And EP has a couple of projections to make right now. EP official can now project Pete Buttigieg will carry the state of New York, securing its 28 electoral votes, after shifting further to the right than any other state between 2020 and 2024. The Empire State nonetheless stays in the Democratic column tonight. We can also project that Buttigieg will carry the state of Colorado. With 10 electoral votes, Colorado stays blue for the 6th consecutive presidential election. While many solidly Democratic states trended rightward in recent years, Colorado has continued to slide leftward, and tonight's results further cement its status as a Democratic stronghold. Now to several key projections for Tulsi Gabbard, starting with a big one. EP official can project that Gabbard will carry the state of Texas and its 40 electoral votes. Polls closed in most of the state an hour ago, and now, with the vast majority of precincts reporting, we can call it Tulsi Gabbard wins Texas, delivering the single largest prize of the night so far to the Republican ticket. EP can also project Gabbard will carry Louisiana, adding 8 electoral votes to her total. In Kansas, the Sunflower State, Gabbard picks up 6 more. Turning to Nebraska, Gabbard is projected to win the statewide votes and the deep red 3rd Congressional District, securing 3 of Nebraska's 5 electoral votes. The 1st and 2nd districts remain too close to call at this hour. In the Dakotas, both North and South Dakota are being projected for Gabbard with 3 electoral votes apiece. And in Wyoming, the nation's least populous state, Gabbard picks up another 3 electoral votes. Now to a slate of key states where EP official is not yet able to make a projection. In Michigan, a critical target for the Buttigieg campaign, with 15 electoral votes on the line, it remains too early to call. This was the 2nd closest state in the 2024 race and is expected to be a tipping point state again tonight. Pete Buttigieg, who moved just across the border into Michigan back in 2022, cast his vote there earlier today, hoping to carry the state that may very well decide his political future. Arizona is also too close to call. After flipping narrowly to Joe Biden in 2020, it snapped back decisively toward Republicans in 2024, with Donald Trump winning it by more than 5 points. Early vote returns out of Maricopa County, the state's most populous, are expected to drop later this hour, and could tell us a lot about where this race is heading. In Minnesota, which holds the longest active Democratic winning streak in presidential contests, the race is also too close to call. Kamala Harris won it by just over 4 points 4 years ago. Buttigieg is hoping his Midwestern roots will help him hold the line in a state Democrats haven't lost since 1972. Next door in Wisconsin, with 10 electoral votes, the stakes are just as high. It's been one of the closest states in the country for over 2 decades, with 5 of the last 7 presidential races decided by less than a single percentage point, including each of the last 3. Down in Iowa, where 6 electoral votes are on the line, it's too early to call. While Iowa has leaned strongly Republican in recent cycles and wasn't considered a battleground by most forecasts heading into tonight, some surprisingly competitive early margins have kept the race open, at least for now. And finally, in the Southwest, New Mexico and its 5 electoral votes remain too early to call. The state hasn't voted Republican since 2004, but it's shown signs of narrowing in recent elections. Kamala Harris carried it by 6 points in 2024, the tightest Democratic win there in 2 decades. Let's take a fresh look at the Electoral College map. Tulsi Gabbard now leads with 194 electoral votes, 76 short of the 270 needed to win the presidency. Pete Buttigieg stands at 112 electoral votes. 9 Western states still have polls open, including California, the biggest Democratic prize on the map, with a whopping 54 electoral votes. Stick with us. The night is still young, and the race for 270 is very much alive. Alright, we have another projection coming in, this time from the Granite State. EP official can now project that Pete Buttigieg will win the state of New Hampshire, securing its 4 electoral votes. New Hampshire has been decided by single-digit margins in 9 straight presidential elections, and tonight is no exception. Buttigieg carries the state by about 5.5 points, a projected raw vote margin of roughly 46,000. It's a solid expected win for the Democrat, and with it, he adds 4 electoral votes to his tally. That brings Pete Buttigieg to 116 electoral votes on the night, still trailing Tulsi Gabbard, who holds steady at 194. Meanwhile, polls have just closed in several more battlegrounds, and we're getting our very first returns. Let's take a look at what we're seeing so far. EP official can now project that Pete Buttigieg will carry the state of New Jersey, delivering its 14 electoral votes to the Democratic column. This marks a key hold for the Buttigieg campaign, but it's also a reminder that New Jersey isn't the deep blue stronghold it once was. Still, Buttigieg manages to reverse much of the GOP's recent momentum in the state, securing a winning margin of about 9.5 points. With nearly all votes now counted, he leads by an estimated 450,000 votes, with a projected final tally of 53.8% to Tulsi Gabbard's 44.3%. And we have a projection in Iowa as well. EP can project that intelligence director, Tulsi Gabbard, is the winner there, locking in the state's 6 electoral votes. It's the second straight double-digit margin for Republicans in Iowa. She takes the state with 54.2% to Buttigieg's 43.3%, an 11-point margin in what was once a Midwestern battleground. With those two projections, let's check in on the updated Electoral College map. Pete Buttigieg now climbs to 130 electoral votes, while Tulsi Gabbard maintains her lead with 200. But we are now entering the heart of the battleground phase. Votes are pouring in from the key swing states: Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, and Nevada. And those results will shape the rest of the night. Stay with us. We're moments away from another significant round of poll closings, as voting is about to come to an end in 3 states here at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, including the key battleground of Nevada. A total of 16 electoral votes are on the line right now. EP official can project that Tulsi Gabbard will win the state of Utah, locking in its 6 electoral votes. That result comes as no surprise, and neither does this. Gabbard is also projected to carry Montana, adding another 4 electoral votes as the state reliably remains in the Republican column. But all eyes are on Nevada. With 6 crucial electoral votes at stake, it is still too close to call. Donald Trump flipped Nevada red in 2024 for the first time in 2 decades. Though the margin remained razor thin, it's one of just 4 states that shifted further to the right in all 3 of Trump's presidential runs, making it a major test of whether Gabbard can maintain and build on that momentum in a race that's far more competitive than many expected just months ago. With the latest calls in Utah and Montana, Tulsi Gabbard has slightly expanded her lead. She now stands at 210 electoral votes, while Pete Buttigieg remains at 130. Let's go ahead and get a key race alert right now. EP can now project that former Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg will carry the state of New Mexico. Buttigieg wins in the land of enchantment, securing its 5 electoral votes. With a projected vote share of 52% to Tulsi Gabbard's 45%, this result aligns closely with recent trends in the state, which, while inching slightly to the right in recent cycles, remains firmly in the Democratic column tonight. It's a key hold for the Buttigieg campaign, though not one that was ever truly on the GOP's radar. We also have a projection in Nebraska's 1st congressional district. EP official can project that Tulsi Gabbard will carry the district, adding 1 more electoral vote to her total. Gabbard has already been projected to win Nebraska's statewide tally and the deep red 3rd district. That leaves just 1 vote outstanding from the Omaha-based 2nd district, the most competitive of the 3. It's worth noting, Nebraska's 1st district was the only constituency in the entire country to swing toward Kamala Harris between 2020 and 2024, and it appears to have done so again with another modest Democratic shift visible in the margins, even as Gabbard holds on to the district. And with these latest projections, here's where things stand on the Electoral College map. As always, 270 electoral votes is the number to watch. That's what it takes to win the presidency. We'll be right back with more key battleground updates. Stay with us. We've got a big one. EP official can now project that Tulsi Gabbard will carry the state of Georgia, the first major battleground to be called tonight. 16 crucial electoral votes will remain in the Republican column. This was one of the tightest contests on the map. Gabbard is projected to edge out Pete Buttigieg by just 0.8 percentage points, 49.4% to 48.6%, making it even closer than Trump's narrow win here 4 years ago. Georgia had been a top target for Democrats this cycle, with demographic shifts fueling optimism in the Buttigieg camp. But once again, Republicans hold the line, and this time it's Gabbard who seals it. This result will likely renew scrutiny of Buttigieg's performance with black voters, a core Democratic constituency in Georgia. But those concerns may quickly fade if he can execute the Midwestern path his campaign has built its entire strategy around. Early returns out of Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, the 3 states that have decided the last 3 presidential elections, show Buttigieg performing at or above his campaign's internal benchmarks. If he sweeps those Rust Belt states, he can still win the presidency. With Georgia now off the board, Tulsi Gabbard climbs to 227 electoral votes, and the math is tightening fast. Without Georgia, the Midwestern trio becomes absolutely critical. Unless he pulls off a surprise flip in Arizona or Nevada, Buttigieg will need to run the table in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin to reach 270. We are heading into the most decisive stretch of the night. Stay with us. Polls are about to close in 4 states out west, including key Democratic strongholds down the Pacific Coast: Washington, Oregon, and California. There are 78 electoral votes at stake as we approach 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific time. Let's take a look. The biggest prize of the night is California, with its massive 54 electoral votes. An EP can project that Pete Buttigieg will carry the state of California, delivering a massive 54 electoral votes. Long a Democratic stronghold, the Golden State provides a major boost to Buttigieg's electoral counts. Moving up the Pacific Coast, EP can also project that Buttigieg will win the state of Washington, securing another 12 electoral votes, and in Oregon, he is the projected winner of 8 more. That keeps the Democratic blue wall along the West Coast intact for a 9th straight presidential election. We do have one projection on the Republican side as well. EP can project that Tulsi Gabbard will carry the state of Idaho, adding 4 electoral votes from this deeply Republican stronghold. Now let's take a look at the updated Electoral College map. With the West Coast now counted, Pete Buttigieg narrows the gap and stands at 209 electoral votes. Tulsi Gabbard still leads with 231. With polls now closed everywhere except Hawaii and Alaska, we anticipate making a number of major projections in the next hour or two from the key races still too close to call. Let's take a closer look now at some of those battleground states. EP can now project that Pete Buttigieg has carried the state of Minnesota, the land of 10,000 lakes, and its 10 electoral votes remains in the Democratic column tonight. Buttigieg will win the state by a margin of around 6 points, extending Minnesota's record streak of voting Democratic in presidential elections to 14 consecutive cycles. We also have a projection from Maine's 2nd congressional district. Tulsi Gabbard is the winner. She carries the rural Northern District by a solid margin, 52.3% to 44.1%, marking the GOP's 4th straight win in this competitive constituency dating back to 2016. However, we're still awaiting a call in the statewide race in Maine. Our decision desk is closely tracking whether Buttigieg's vote share stays above 50%. If it drops below that threshold, Maine's ranked choice voting system would be triggered. So where do things stand? Tulsi Gabbard now holds 232 electoral votes. Pete Buttigieg trails just behind with 219. Only 7 states remain too close to call: North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, Nevada, and Maine's statewide result. And with our final poll closings, including Hawaii and Alaska, coming up at midnight Eastern, we are rapidly approaching the point where this race could break decisively in either direction. That's right. EP official can now project Tulsi Gabbard will carry the state of North Carolina, a pivotal battleground and a major moment in tonight's race. This is just the 2nd major battleground projected for either candidate, and it's a significant win for Gabbard, pushing her another step closer to the 270 electoral votes needed to clinch the presidency. Let's look at the final numbers. Gabbard wins by a slim 1.3-point margin, with fewer than 76,000 votes separating her from former Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. This marks the 6th straight presidential race in which North Carolina has been decided by under 4 points, solidifying its status as one of the nation's most perennially close contests. With this result, Gabbard climbs to 248 electoral votes. Democrats had long hoped North Carolina's demographic trends, a growing urban electorate, younger voters, and surging diversity would finally turn the state blue. But tonight's outcome underscores just how challenging that path remains. And now the map narrows. For Buttigieg, the road to 270 increasingly hinges on the Rust Belt, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, the so-called blue wall that had been the Democrats' electoral foundation for decades. He now needs all 3. As of this hour, Buttigieg holds a lead in Michigan. Meanwhile, the margins in both Wisconsin and Pennsylvania continue to tighten, with heavy Democratic vote drops coming in from Milwaukee, Philadelphia, and other urban strongholds. It's coming down to the wire. The clock strikes midnight on the East Coast, and with that, polls have now closed in Alaska and Hawaii. While we don't expect results out of Alaska for at least a couple more hours, we do have a projection to make in Hawaii right now. EP can now project that former Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg will carry the Aloha State, securing its 4 electoral votes. No surprise here, Hawaii remains a solidly Democratic state, and it goes to Buttigieg tonight. As for Alaska, the race there is too early to call. The state has voted Democratic only once, back in 1964 for Lyndon Johnson, but it's trended closer to the center in recent years. We're still awaiting the first significant wave of returns before any projection can be made. With Hawaii now in the Democratic column, Buttigieg climbs to 223 electoral votes. But the race is far from over. The path to 270 runs directly through the remaining battlegrounds still too close to call, including Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Nevada, Arizona, and the statewide race in Maine. Much more ahead. Stay with us. We can now make a pair of key calls. First, in Maine, EP official can now project that Pete Buttigieg will carry the statewide vote, securing the 2 at-large electoral votes on top of the 1st congressional district he was projected to win earlier in the night. Our decision desk had held off making this call until we could confirm that Buttigieg wouldn't dip below the 50% threshold that would have triggered ranked choice voting. But with virtually all votes now counted, he holds at 52.4% to Vance's 44.3%, an 8-point win that locks in 3 of 4 Democratic votes from the Pine Tree State. And we have another projection just in from the Heartland. EP can project that Pete Buttigieg will win Nebraska's 2nd congressional district. The Omaha-based seat has emerged as a small but meaningful blue enclave in an otherwise deep red state, and tonight, Democrats have now won it for the 3rd straight presidential cycle. With these 2 pickups, Buttigieg climbs to 226 electoral votes, pulling closer to Tulsi Gabbard, who remains at 248, and now the map begins to crystallize. If Gabbard carries Alaska, which she's expected to, her total rises to 251. That means she could clinch the presidency with a win in Pennsylvania alone, or through any combination of 2 or more remaining states. For Buttigieg, the math is far less forgiving. He almost certainly needs to sweep the upper Midwest, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin to have any realistic shot at reaching 270. EP can now project that Tulsi Gabbard will carry the state of Alaska, securing its 3 electoral votes and pushing her total to 251, just 1 key state away from the presidency. In the final projection, Gabbard defeats Pete Buttigieg by roughly 12 points in the last frontier. A strong showing, though in line with recent Republican performances in the state. Alaska hasn't voted for a Democrat in a presidential race since Lyndon Johnson in 1964. And now, all eyes turn to Pennsylvania. The Keystone State, with its 19 electoral votes, could be the tipping point that hands Tulsi Gabbard the presidency, but her margin there has been steadily shrinking throughout the night. Heavily Democratic vote batches continue to roll in from the cities, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and the increasingly blue suburbs surrounding them. What's more, a substantial tranche of absentee ballots remains uncounted, ballots expected to lean even more heavily toward Buttigieg based on pre-election trends and historical precedent. It's a familiar story in recent cycles, the so-called red mirage on election night that gradually fades as mail-in and urban votes are tallied. The only question now is whether Gabbard's election day dominance and rural margins are enough to withstand the coming Democratic wave. We're about to find out. Let's take a look at the latest numbers coming out of Pennsylvania. EP official can now project that Pete Buttigieg will carry the state of Wisconsin, a pivotal call in what's become one of the most suspenseful election nights in modern history. This is the first break in the Rust Belt trifecta that has delivered the presidency in each of the last 3 elections. Donald Trump carried Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania in 2016. Joe Biden flipped all 3 in 2020. Trump won them back in 2024. And now, in 2028, Wisconsin flips blue once more, this time for Buttigieg. It's a razor-thin result. As expected, Buttigieg is projected to win with 49.3% of the vote to Tulsi Gabbard's 48.5%, a margin of just 0.8 percentage points, continuing the state's streak of ultra-competitive outcomes. In fact, 5 of the last 7 presidential contests here have been decided by less than a point. This win brings Buttigieg to 236 electoral votes, just 34 away from the presidency and now 15 behind Gabbard's 251. Those 2 remaining Rust Belt prizes, Michigan and Pennsylvania, combine for exactly 34 electoral votes. If Buttigieg carries both, he wins the presidency. But here's the reality: we may not know the answer tonight. Vote counting in Pennsylvania has slowed for the night, and while we're still seeing updates out of Michigan, the margin remains narrow and uncertain. As for Arizona and Nevada, both are still too close to call, with significant votes yet to be reported, so that may be where things stand, at least for now. What we do know, the map is tightening, the math is unforgiving, and the margin for error is gone. Thank you for staying with us through a remarkable night of democracy in action. We'll be back later this morning with more calls, more context, and a closer look at where this race and the country go from here. Take a look at this, a major development in the race for the presidency. EP official can now project that Pete Buttigieg has carried the state of Michigan. A late-breaking vote drop out of Wayne County, home to Detroit, has solidified Buttigieg's lead in the eyes of our decision desk. With 15 electoral votes, Michigan is now in the Democratic column once again. This is a particularly personal win for Buttigieg, though originally from Indiana, the former South Bend mayor moved to Traverse City, Michigan in 2022. At the time, many speculated he might pursue a Senate run, but instead he set his sights higher. Tonight, he reaps the reward, winning Michigan with 49.6% of the vote to Tulsi Gabbard's 48.3%. Nearly an exact reversal of Donald Trump's 1.4-point victory here in 2024. This marks the 4th consecutive presidential election where Michigan has been decided by less than 3 points, a state that remains fiercely contested but has consistently leaned blue in recent decades. Donald Trump remains the only Republican to win it since 1988. And with that projection, take a look at the scoreboard. An extraordinary moment. The Electoral College count now stands at a deadlock. Tulsi Gabbard, 251, Pete Buttigieg, 251. 3 states remain too close to call: Pennsylvania, Nevada, and Arizona. But here's the key: Pennsylvania, with its 19 electoral votes, would now be decisive. Whoever wins the Keystone State will win the presidency, regardless of how the other 2 states break. And that's welcome news for the Buttigieg campaign. Take a look here. Key race alert. Gabbard's lead in Pennsylvania has shrunk to just 0.2 percentage points, with 95% of the estimated vote in. Vote counting has paused for the night, and we're not expecting significant updates until sometime tomorrow afternoon. It's also important context. Buttigieg is closer to Gabbard now than Kamala Harris was to Donald Trump at this same point in the count back in 2024. And crucially, the remaining vote is expected to favor Democrats, largely absentee ballots, and primarily from Democratic strongholds like Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and the surrounding suburbs. Meanwhile, Gabbard has taken the lead in Arizona, and that lead has grown. With 68% of the vote counted, she's up by a little more than a full point, and current trends suggest she's favored to hold it. In Nevada, Gabbard's edge has narrowed significantly, now sitting just under 3 points with about 70% of the vote in, but time may be running out for the Buttigieg campaign there. Then again, at this point, it may not matter. We'll be back in the morning with the very latest. Thanks for spending this historic night with us. Good afternoon, or perhaps more accurately, Good day 2 of election night in America. It's now noon on the East Coast, and we're continuing to track what has become one of the most razor-thin finishes in modern political history. Here's where things stand at this hour. 3 states remain unprojected: Pennsylvania, Nevada, and Arizona. But make no mistake, only one of them truly matters now. With both Pete Buttigieg and Tulsi Gabbard locked at 251 electoral votes apiece, the 19 electoral votes from Pennsylvania alone would be enough to push either candidate to the 270 needed to win the presidency. Let's take a look at the numbers out of Pennsylvania. Gabbard currently leads by just 2,768 votes, the narrowest margin we've seen so far. With an estimated 100,000 to 200,000 ballots still left to count, many of them from absentee returns and late arriving urban precincts, sources inside the Buttigieg campaign say they expect to take the lead imminently, and not just take it, but hold it. The remaining ballots are coming largely from Democratic strongholds like Philadelphia, Montgomery, Delaware, and Allegheny County, areas where Biden and Harris ran up big margins in 2020 and 2024, and where Buttigieg is reportedly matching or exceeding their precinct-level benchmarks. Now, over in the West, it's a different story. In Nevada, Gabbard's lead remains steady at around 28,000 votes, with about 30% of the votes still to report. And in Arizona, her lead has grown overnight, now nearing 58,000 votes, putting her in a strong position there as well. But all eyes are on Pennsylvania. If Buttigieg flips the Keystone State, he wins the presidency. Regardless of what happens in Arizona or Nevada, if Gabbard holds on, she's headed to the White House. No projection yet, but the stakes have never been clearer. We'll be watching every update hour by hour. Stay with us. After 2 days of vote counting and one of the closest finishes in modern political history, EP official can now project that Pete Buttigieg has been elected the 47th president of the United States. It marks a truly historic moment for the country, as Buttigieg becomes not only the youngest person elected to the presidency since John F. Kennedy, but the first openly gay American ever elected to the nation's highest office. The 46-year-old Democrat brings a resume rarely seen in American politics: a Harvard graduate, Rhodes Scholar at Oxford, Navy intelligence officer, and Afghanistan veteran. He rose to national prominence in 2020 as the surprise breakout star of that year's Democratic primary, winning the Iowa caucuses and becoming the first openly gay candidate to earn delegates in a presidential race. He went on to serve as Secretary of Transportation in the Biden administration before launching his second presidential bid following Kamala Harris's defeat in 2024. That remarkable political arc now culminates with victory in 2028. The EP projection comes as Pennsylvania, the most closely watched state in the nation, was called just after 3 p.m. Eastern Time on Wednesday. A batch of absentee ballots out of Allegheny and Delaware counties pushed Buttigieg's lead to over 35,000 votes statewide, enough for the EP decision desk to project him the winner. With 3,511,505 votes to Tulsi Gabbard's 3,476,310, it's a margin of less than half a point, but one that carried the full weight of the presidency. And with that win in Pennsylvania, Buttigieg reaches exactly 270 electoral votes, the magic number to clinch the presidency, while Gabbard remains at 251. Arizona and Nevada, still unprojected, are now irrelevant to the outcome. 2 years ago, few could have predicted this ending. But today, history has been written. Pete Buttigieg is the president-elect of the United States. And that does it for this 2028 election night prediction. I truly hope you enjoyed the video. I've put weeks of work into making this as immersive, detailed, and accurate as possible. Feel free to disagree, share your thoughts, or leave any comments, questions, or feedback down below. I genuinely appreciate your input. Whether it's positive or constructive, it helps make this content even better. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and check out more election coverage and predictions right here. Huge shout out to my channel members listed in the description below. Your support means the world. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time. EP out.